like to call the meeting to order, please. Ms. Ford, will you call the roll? Here.
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 Here. Here.
All right, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So,
Oh, I got some amendments, sorry. Got two amendments here. I've received the following request to amend the agenda under item Roman numeral 7, board matters. Item C, remove the following items, number 1 and 2. So again, under Roman numeral 7, board matters, item C, remove items 1 and 2. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
so moved.
Second.
Ms. Ford?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
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 Yes. Next, we'll have our pledge to the flag. Would you stand, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
States of
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to approval of the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right, do we have any items we'd like to look at or pull? All right, Mrs. Ford?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. All right, that brings us down to administrative business matters. Item A, approval of the CEP schools for 2020 and 2021. Do we have a motion to approve? All right, do we have a second?
So moved.
Second?
All right, any discussion there? Mrs. Thurman?
Yes, I'm going to vote against this for the same reason that I always have. It's one of the most unfair things, in my opinion, that we do in the school system, treating all people in a certain school like they all have money and treating others in other schools like they don't have any. And I just think it just pits one group of people against another. Maybe somebody working in the office, and just because your child goes to this school, you get all your meals free. And you go to this other person that may work in the same office, that maybe even make less than that one, they get theirs free, and the other one may have to pay for theirs. So I just think it's very unfair the way this program works, and so therefore I vote against it.
Any other discussion on this item? Okay, Mrs. Ford?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes. Right, so next item here under board matters would be item number 1 there, the calendar for 2021 and the 2022 school year. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll second. I just have a question.
Did you get those, Mrs. Ford? Okay, go ahead, Mrs. Robinson.
Yeah, I'm just curious, with the task force committee working right now on the reopening plan, if the committee suggests to change any of the holidays that are in this schedule, like maybe to resemble what UTC is currently doing with condensing fall break and I believe Labor Day maybe, and extending basically from Thanksgiving through winter break, would we basically just come back and revote on this calendar?
Yeah, I don't, so as right now, we don't anticipate any changes to.
Okay.
One clear, this is 21, 22 school year, so this is not this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
School year.
Okay.
We'll figure it out. But just as always, any changes or recommendations will come. I don't anticipate, I don't anticipate any changes to the calendar. We have a calendar as it's set. Do anticipate in the next week or so, there's a state board of ed approved policies that are aligned to those rules that could provide additional guidance as to waivers and such in regards to the implications of COVID-19. From the standpoint of changing our calendar, I don't necessarily see that as a point. I was talking to somebody who worked at Chat State, currently, and just it's a little bit different for us in the K-12 sphere than it is for post-secondary institutions because everybody's an adult at that point, and we it's a little bit different for us to care for children, and so we understand also that we have that standpoint. We don't anticipate any changes. Obviously, it is a year.
Hey, Mrs. Thurman?
Yes, we had a little bit of a discussion about this when we met Monday night. I still think we have way too many breaks. The starting and the stopping is what I continue to hear from teachers, especially in the elementary school grades, that all the starting and stopping is just not good around. You have all those days off in October, and then you have the time off in there, and then you have so much time off in December. There's very few full weeks in there if you look. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 full weeks there, and just all the starting and stopping. I just think we can come up with a better plan than this, and I just don't like I say, all the starts and stops in the calendar.
Okay, anything else here on the calendar? Before you have to help me, I'm trying to keep my eye here on hands, but I don't see any. Okay.
Just a
Go ahead,
quick
Mr.
question. When we compare our calendar with other systems across the state with regard to what Ms. Thurman just spoke to, breaks, time off, what do we look like compared to other districts across the state?
Yeah, we're very aligned. We're very, very similar. The one shift for us that's a little bit different is when our spring break is. Our spring break is a little bit later than most school systems across the state, but our calendar looks very, very similar to most calendars across the state. And the challenge for all, these calendars, only so many ways you can slice them. There's 180 instructional days that have to take place, and you have a finite period of time in which you can do them. You've got Thanksgiving, you've got Christmas, you've got some things that you have to do that are there that are holidays, and then everybody is challenged to get as many instructional days in before the state assessment as you possibly can. It's always a goal, and so it's a 180-day calendar, and 180 days have to be students have to be instructed, and that's what we're working within. That's what all systems are working within. So our calendar is pretty similar to most school districts.
Yeah, Mrs. Lennon?
I have a question about the spring break date too. I think is so late for 2021. Is there a possibility of I heard a lot of complaints about that. Is there a possibility of changing that? Because when the spring break is that late, when you get back, it's just basically wasted time. If that could align more with the spring break that in March, maybe when the other schools take their spring breaks, some of the private schools do their breaks in March, as well as other schools, and not aligning it with the Easter break. That was maybe something to look at, just because of how late it comes in the year, and then you're hit with your proms and your graduations, and it's just like there's really no learning time for your children once you come back from that spring break. And then there is, I did look at other school systems, and there are some discrepancies in that. There are schools that do choose to do the week-long Thanksgiving break versus the week-long fall break. So I just think it's a preference. I think some do the week-long Thanksgiving versus the week-long fall. And I think it was that our teachers and community members did want to do the fall break versus the Thanksgiving break. So I think it was something that the community members and teachers decided on.
Speak to how we said it there.
So the conversation around spring break, when we did extensive stakeholder feedback around this in 2018, to your point, we kind of presented in the survey two options. One option was to align our spring break with the UT system, UTC, Chat State, UT Knoxville, which typically all go to spring break at about the same time. It's typically the second or third week of March. So you would always know that spring break was going to be in a similar window, or anchoring spring break to Easter, to the Easter holiday weekend, Good Friday, either starting it with Good Friday or bookending it with the Good Friday. The response that we got both on the survey and in parent focus groups was that people preferred the spring break that moved around with Easter, because as it was communicated, many of the other independent K-12 schools here in Hamilton County do the Easter-based spring break. And so for families where they had a child in Hamilton County Public Schools and a child in one of the independent schools, they preferred that they would be able to go on spring break together. And use that anchoring around Easter. And similarly for parents who may have worked in Hamilton County schools, but they have a child in one of the independent schools. So that was the prevailing sentiment as to why the feedback of the people who responded. Certainly in that sample, we did get, a couple thousand, 4,000 responses. I can't say it was like our COVID-19 survey response of 25,000 parents, right? But that was the response that we got. And so we moved with that feedback based on the survey response and the focus group response. As you all know, when we came up with the challenge this year with COVID-19, we had this discussion of flipping our spring break, because we then realized that at the time, before we realized that school would be out the entire rest of the year, we thought that most of the other districts were having their spring breaks in March, and we were, trying to adjust and align. So that came up this year, and so we did. Again, this is 2 years out. I do think board, or we could go back and get community feedback again and see if we get better engagement before we adopt that calendar, to ask the question again around spring break, having experienced what we experienced. And similarly for fall break, the overwhelming feedback that we got was that people like the fall break being in October, because if you're making travel plans, that's kind of off cycle for the travel season. So folks felt like it's more expensive, of course, to travel on a Thanksgiving week, and people like the idea of being able to travel kind of off cycle and not have higher prices and having to compete as much with other folks who might be taking that travel during Thanksgiving, which, as you know, kicks off the holiday travel season. So again, that was the feedback that we got.
Based on what you were saying, Nakia,
I think it is interesting that March 11th marks the end of the quarter. And so if we were to plan to move spring break away from Easter, we would finish a quarter much like we are going to on October 8th and head into a week of break. So we would finish that next quarter and then go into a week of break if we took the week of the 14th. Hadn't thought about that until this conversation, but
Yeah, that was exactly the original proposal, that essentially after the end of every quarter, we would find ourselves on a longer break. And so that was the original calendar option that we presented in 2018, that we would be on that same rhythm. And to your point, with that same logic, I think that was why we put that proposal forth. But it was rejected by the feedback that we got.
so if we were to do that, then each of our large breaks would be found right at the end of a quarter.
That's correct.
Which would be one step toward this goal that we're talking about of not breaking up our learning blocks quite as much. I'd love to hear what the other board members think about that. I think that's interesting.
I think I like it.
I know as a many-year teacher, and I know several of you were too. I know Kathy and Joe. I know it's really good to finish a unit, you get your testing in, and then you start new again. That's a good way of breaking, but whatever the group wants to do, I'll go along with.
I think it would be interesting to get very important to get teacher feedback on it as well.
The one thing I'll say about it, just I've just kind of always worked under whatever schedule I was given. I know that sounds a little passive, but I think the thing for me with schedules is and calendars have always been, as long as I can remember, everybody's got an opinion about the calendar, and in my mind, typically it's been no win. It literally has almost been 50-50 when you get down to two choices around the calendar, and they seem to always revolve around either the fall break or the Thanksgiving break or the spring break, and what people's preferences are in regard to that. So, I mean, I'm open to anything. If teachers are saying, that they prefer to have, as we say, those learning blocks not be broken up. It sounds like the only one would be in the spring. I mean, I'm open to whatever, but that's kind of my thought on that. I mean, a calendar, in my mind, many times is no win. So, Mrs. Thurman.
I was just, I don't have a problem with that, but I know that Friday there before Easter, I know that's a big travel day. Well, it's actually, let's say it's not even colored anything. That's what I was trying to see. That's the 15th, I think. It would be that day, if I'm not mistaken. And so would that still be a day off? Because I know that's a day that a lot of kids would probably not be here anyway. But I mean, I like the idea, like Kathy said, of, moving it up, because that is awful late in the year to be taking a week off.
Yeah. Yeah. Mrs. Lennon, did you hear that?
Yes, it's 21. Yes, it's 21.
Okay. Do we just need to table this to get some feedback from what? I mean, is there a need for us to have to do it right now, or what?
There's not a need. It's actually
Because somebody said they wanted to get some feedback from the teachers. I don't know who said that, but.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
maybe just a quick question, and maybe we do need to table it. I kind of agree with Ms. Thurman, but Dr. Edwards, if you're still there, and you said you got back, I didn't hear the number of surveys, but I'd be curious to know of those number of surveys, do you know how many of those were teachers or how many of those were our customers, our students? Because they might be very different opinions.
No, that's a great point, Mr. Smith. And what I think we can do, we absolutely have the survey results, and I will push those back out to the board members in email. I'm going back from my memory. I've slept since then, but from my memory, again, I think that we had, a few thousand people respond. We had decent coverage across each of you all's board districts. I do remember we had a robust discussion about particularly Mrs. Jones and Tiffany's district, that they did not have as much participation as the others. And I do think amongst parents versus educators, I think we had a lot of people who overlapped in categories, right? That they were parents and educators. But I will pull up the survey results and send you all that feedback, because I know I've saved it. And again, it could be, people are feeling very differently given everything that we've gone through. And, when you have, pandemics, tornadoes, locusts, and whatever else is coming. People have started thinking about that late spring break versus the March. So it certainly couldn't hurt, to my mind, to look at feedback for the 21-22 year. I do think it is a good point that currently it is still under this same configuration for the upcoming school year. For 2021, we still have the Easter-based spring break. So again, it's the pleasure of the board.
So, Mr. Chairman, I know we got a motion and a second on the floor, I believe, don't we? So do we? Can we just make a motion to table that original motion? I will make that motion that we table the original motion and revisit this later on. That's my motion.
I'll second that.
All right, so make a motion to, and a second to table that in lieu of the results, right, that Dr. Towns Edwards will get to us. So we need to vote on that. Go ahead, Ms. Ford.
Yes.
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 Can I just make a quick comment about that?
Yes, ma'am.
I guess I'm totally in support of everything everyone said. I guess I just remember how exhausting the calendar process was. And I guess I just wanted to simply state that as a board member, I don't expect for Dr. Johnson's team to make this the next priority, because there's so much going on right now with the task force, reopening schools, and honestly, there's so many thoughts right now on what school may even look like this school year. It's hard to even know and say what school looks like the following year. I know we will definitely want to probably approve it by the fall, but I just wanted to say that I hope our board isn't going to expect for this to be the next, most important thing, because I don't think it should be.
I think you're correct. Absolutely. That's why I said there's no rush, I think.
All right, that brings us to item 2 there under Board Matters 7A, which would be the federal programs consolidated application. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on that? All right, Mrs. Ford.
Yes.
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 Yes. All right, next on our agenda would be item 7B1, the Washington Hills lease agreement. We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. McClendon. All right, any discussion there? Okay, Ms. Robinson has something here. Or Mrs. Thurman, you.
Go ahead. Go ahead. You got it, okay. Well, there is 17.7 acres here, and I just want, just because there was a little bit of confusion about this when we talked about this property, before people didn't know what went along with the lease agreement and what didn't, just make sure that everyone's clear that the place for the Washington Alternative School is not involved in that agreement. Okay, now, we're going to move the Washington Alternative School, is that correct?
Yes, we are going to looking at moving it to probably the Hillcrest location,
Hillcrest.
but we're obviously with Harrison, we won't be able to move it in August, but as soon as.
Okay, so what do we plan to do with that property when we move? I mean, we're going to have a building there. It's a pretty good sized building. Have we had any discussion about what's going to happen with that building?
We're going to ask the board what they want to do with it. We hadn't had a ton of conversation about specifically that property, Ms. Thurman, you know.
How much is property involved, because this lease doesn't cover is it the baseball field and the school?
Football.
Oh, it doesn't?
No,
it
the
includes
football
the
field's a
football
part of
field.
it, correct, baseball field school.
Football field's part of the
And there's
lease
some acreage
agreement.
behind it.
Yeah, so we're going to have a baseball field there and another school there, and we're not real sure what to do. And I don't know how much property is there that's sitting on. I think it would just be good for the board to know, because that's going to be empty. And
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that the biggest challenge with that facility, it's one of our better facilities.
Right.
Yeah, I won't say one of our better, but you know, top half, top half in contextually.
well, the football field's in excellent shape. I know
Yeah,
that.
contextually, it's in the upper half. So obviously, you've always got potential for growth in that area, which is something to consider. You've always got potential for other programming, which is always something to consider. And it's real estate, you know, and as well as it's something to consider. And so either of those options will be there. You know.
Well, I
for
just wanted the board to be aware, since no one ever seemed to know that it was even available before, that after the school's gone, we are going to have that building. And I just want to know, if you don't mind, say it's no big rush, like Tiffany said, it's not top priority, but how much additional property is there where Washington sits along with the baseball field? I'd just like to know how much property we're talking about there.
Is there, I don't know if there's a baseball field there. I know
It's really nice football field.
I know there's football. Is there a baseball field? Tiffany, is there there's not one? There's not a baseball field? I must be thinking about the
There's a football
one.
field there's a football field, there's the school, there's the rec center, and then there's some property
Okay.
behind
Well,
it.
my brother went to school there. My younger brother went to school there, and maybe I'm thinking of the baseball fields over at Lakeside. Maybe that's what I'm thinking about. Okay,
Lakeside,
it's right up the street. Okay,
That's
so that's not part of it. So I'm just confused about that. But anyway, okay. I just need to know how much property is there. Thank you.
Mrs. Jones?
I don't know anything y'all said. Sorry. It sounds very muffled to us. Like you sound muffled and it's faint. So I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
Well, Ms. Jones, what Ms. Thurman was asking about the amount, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Oh,
I can hear you. We can hear you when you all speak
Yes.
directly into the mic, but when you relax or sit back or something, I don't know, because we can't see you either. But I just know it's hard. It's
okay.
difficult.
So Ms. Thurman was asking a question about how much property was there, and then ultimately the plan for that school site going forward. And I think what I was just explaining to her is that there's one of really 2 or 3 options that are there. Obviously, it could become a different program. You could have growth, which requires you to put the building back in play, or, you know, it's available real estate that is also available, you know, if the board decides to sell it. So any of those 3 things exist. She was also asking about the plans to move the alternative school and get it on a bus line, and that is still the plan, is to move the alternative school out of that building to get it on a bus line for easy access for students. And so that was the meat of the conversation, I believe.
Dr. Highlander?
I've got a question. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I like working with our city people. I mean, the commissioner out there is a friend of Ms. Jones and mine. Russell Gilbert is a really fine person, and he's concerned about, and I would like to work with him. The question I've got is, if, as Dr. Johnson alluded to, if we have need for a school in the area in the future, would this lease agreement preclude us from using the football field and that other property if we need it, combine that with the school building? I mean, is this lease definite, or can we get out of it if we need it for school use? I want to work with the city, but I don't want it to tie our hands to where we couldn't use the property if we needed it in the future, as Dr. Johnson indicated. Thank you. That might be a legal question for Scott or for Brent. I'm not sure.
I don't know that, is Mary, I don't know if Mary's on the line, Brent's on the line, we'll speak to the mechanics.
Mary is too.
Yeah, Mary or Brent can speak to the mechanics of it, and what it allows us to do in the midst of a situation that we need the property.
So the lease agreement only includes the building and property that the city has been using for the past 20 years. Within the 17-acre site is excluded from the lease. The lease agreement also has an out clause. I have to pull it up. I think it's 18 months. That was something we negotiated with the city, was a little bit longer notice than normal because they are making improvements to that building at their cost. So
By lease, that's by leasee. Okay.
What?
It says on page 4, it looks like 10 termination, but that's by the leasee though, not the leaseor. That's what I say, so I don't know who the leaseor is. But the leasee says 9 months, so I don't know what the leaseor is. No, I mean, I know that. I just don't know what their time is. Theirs is 9 months, so I don't know what the leaseor is.
Was Brent done? I'm confused.
On item number 9 in the lease agreement, which is on page 4, which is also page 5 of 10 on the board agenda packet, it shows that we would provide 18 months written notice in order to terminate this lease before the end of the initial term.
I think that would be fair and sufficient to give them that much notice.
Yeah, the 18 months was negotiated between myself, Scott, and the city attorney because they are putting improvements into that building that they are paying for. So we thought it was a reasonable time frame based on the fact that they are improving the structure.
Okay, any other discussion on that item?
Hey, Brett, since we're doing them such a good deal here, maybe they'll give us a break on some stormwater runoff. Put that in your negotiating pocket, Big Daddy.
You know, I think that is a great item for you and Councilman Smith to discuss over in Hickson one day.
All right, I think we're ready, Mrs. Ford.
Dr. Highlander,
Yes.
Mrs. Hill, Mrs. Jones,
Yes.
Mrs. Lennon,
Yes.
Mr. McClendon,
Yes.
Mrs. Robinson.
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Thurman,
Yes.
Chairman Wingate.
Yes. All right. Do we have any other announcements, Dr. Highlander?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a suggestion that we're looking at. We deleted one item on that we had for looking at some buildings. May I suggest a meeting with the commission to discuss our current financial options for buildings? That would be, do we need to look at, I know we're in trying financial times, but I would like to see, we have several buildings that have a lot of needs, and I was wondering if we could meet with the commissioner sometime we could meet it via Zoom if they wanted to, or however you wanted to do it. You and the chairman of the commission wanted to get together and do it, or the educational chair. And I think it would be good for us to see what our possibilities are for capital needs right now.
Only comment I would make to that, I don't necessarily disagree with that, other than it might be wise for us to get through the budget season this summer.
Okay.
You know, because
Well,
I'm sure they still don't, they're still not real clear on where they are.
Then I'll say that once we get through the budget, then I would like to look with them and see what the possibilities are for meeting some building needs. I would agree with that. So just keep that in mind then. How's that? Thank you.
Mrs. Hill.
Thank you, Joe. Y'all, I've been thinking a lot about a lot of things lately, and I have something I want to say, but I don't necessarily have all the right words for what I want to say. So if y'all just kind of listen with an open mind and an open heart, I would really appreciate it. Over the last few weeks, our nation has been mourning the death of George Floyd, a man who, when confronted by the police, he complied in all of the ways that we teach our children that they should comply. And now George Floyd is dead. So the system that we say was built to protect him and all of us, instead it took his life. And I know that Mr. Floyd's story is one of thousands of millions throughout our nation's history, and even in our Chattanooga history. And I am moved right now, and I am convicted by my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ to want better for Hamilton County and for Chattanooga. I believe that each of us has to do the work to root out racism in our own hearts. And as a white woman, I carry this responsibility with great solemnity. And I have been quite introspective on how I can have a positive effect in my small circle and my larger networks. Yet, while I am an individual and I am a mother, I am also an elected leader, as are each of us on this board. And consequently, our responsibility is greater, and we have the potential to have a lasting impact for good or for bad. And I want it to be good. Our board holds the futures of more than 44,000 children in our hands. And a lot of those kids are Black and brown. And we cannot deny that disparities exist. Now, in the last 3 years since Dr. Johnson has been with us, and 2 of which I've had the honor to serve alongside all of you, we have made some really important strides toward a more equitable educational experience. I've been kind of taking stock and making a list. Some of the things that stand out to me: we've established an Office of Equity. We have seen AP course participation by Black students increase from 360 courses to 817 in the space of a year, from 1718 to 1920, so 2 years. We've standardized our magnet school process and worked on the way that we promote those schools to make sure that families all over our county know about those programs and feel welcome to participate in them. We've changed the way that we use our Title I funds. We've moved away from supplanting resources to truly using them to supplement and providing district funding the way that we should in our Title I schools. And another thing I've always thought is important is we added an element in Dr. Johnson's evaluation that we are looking every year at our minority student academic progress, because we know that those kids matter. And I'm proud of that work, but we have lost our momentum. Somewhere along the way, that word equity, it became a bad word in Hamilton County. And I think it's time that we start talking about race and racism openly in Hamilton County schools. We need to shine a light on the fact that for decades we have not delivered on the promise of equal educational opportunities. And commit as the board, we are the board here in 2020, that's all we can be, that we will do that hard work of creating policy that closes the opportunity gap, because we have been elected to be stewards of this system. I've requested from Dr. Johnson that over the next 30 days, I would like for his team to compile a comprehensive list of our progress toward equity, and also a list of disparities that exist in our system for us to examine as a board. We haven't done that in a couple of years, and we need to take another hard look at it. Then, as we continue to implement our strategic plan, we can dig in and figure out how to do better for our students. Also, to further prepare us for the work, I've spoken with Chairman Wingate, and tonight I asked Chairman Wingate to support my request for Racial Equity Institute groundwater training for all board members. Groundwater training is a presentation that I think will provide us with a shared understanding of the facts of structural racism in systems. It's very data driven. We've had other county leaders participate in it, and it's a real learning opportunity. To close, I'll just say that public service, it's the most difficult work I've ever done. And I will be the first to say that I've already made plenty of mistakes. I have sat quietly and I have allowed racist statements to go unchecked. And I have allowed divisive rhetoric to distract me from the work at hand. And that silence has hurt people, and I am sorry. I teach my children to stand up for what they believe in, even when their knees are knocking. And I commit to do nothing less. So I hope that each of you will join me, and that when we have that information in front of us, that we'll be ready to work together to make progress for Hamilton County students of every color, but especially for those who have for so long faced the largest opportunity gaps. Thank you. That's all.
Anybody got any comments? Mrs. Robinson.
Sure. Well, I certainly don't feel like we can not say anything at all. I mean, Jenny, I appreciate you pouring your heart out and being very vulnerable and transparent with us, even though it's over the computer at the moment. Certainly, since I joined this board, the topics that Jenny's discussing are very dear to my heart. And I know that, a number of us, really all of us, are in love with children. And we believe that providing a great education for them is exactly what we're here for. And I've seen every board member step up to the plate on that in a variety of ways, whether it's always been the perfect way that's been in our individual eyes or not. I have seen every single board member step up and really put themselves out there to do what's right for children across the county. So Jenny, I think that that's a really amazing challenge, and I think that it would be really fascinating to see our board go through that. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. I'm also certainly interested to see the list that Dr. Johnson's team will put together, hopefully. And, I think that this is a really hard, topic, and that we all have a lot to learn. I'm certainly here with my listening ears on, but I also don't expect to solve the problem overnight. Like, we need to be able to spend time together and discuss these things. And perhaps that's not fully in a public setting, because I'm not sure that always doing this in a public setting is what's going to get us there. But I guess that'll be at the board's will. So certainly appreciate all the work that Dr. Johnson does. And over his time of being here as our superintendent, there have been times where, I don't think that I've expressed how grateful I am for his work and for the challenge that he faces in his role, serving the variety of children that we serve as a school system. But he also is berated by the media a lot. No offense, Megan, it's not necessarily you, but it's hard being in his position. And so I think there have been times where we should have celebrated more or spoke up more as individual board members. And I'm really just talking about myself, because I'm not going to say that I expect anyone else to do anything. But certainly right now, I've had a lot of time to think about and review, like, did I do a good enough job stepping up and celebrating the successes that we've had, or, defending Dr. Johnson or his team members when the public was questioning, the route at which we were doing something. Sometimes we stay silent because it's easier. So I know that Jenny's made a commitment, and I hear that commitment, and I appreciate that, Jenny. And certainly I'm going to do my best to step up to that commitment as well. So thanks, Jenny.
Dr. Highlander.
Thank you. Jenny, thank you for bearing your soul to us. I will quote something that has been changed. The wording has been changed. When I was 4 and 5 years old at a church my dad pastored, where Commissioner Bankston attends now, I learned a little song that said, red and yellow, black and white, they're all precious in His sight. And I think that I think every one of the 9 of us would agree with that. Every child is precious. Every one of the 9 of us do. And I think, Jenny, I thank you for reminding us that we may need to remember that sometimes, but I believe we all believe that, and I think that we need to live that as well as believe it in our hearts. But thank you.
Anyone else have comment?
Thank you, Jenny. Mr. Chairman, I just add that, I would really like to think that, just personally speaking, that my life has been a testimony to, this is just not an area that I personally struggle in, I don't think. I want to listen. I want to learn. I believe this whole issue goes back to the condition of man's heart. And my training manual is God's Word. And I think equity is something that we got to continue to look at and get better at. And I want to listen. I want to learn. But my training manual is nothing more than God's Word of how to approach this particular issue. But I appreciate Ms. Hill pouring her heart out.
Mrs. Thurman.
Yeah, Jenny, I appreciate it as well. Joe and I had this long conversation before the meeting started about this, because I know Joe's work. I've known Joe for too long, about 45 years. But I've known a lot of his work, seen a lot of his work, admire what he's done. And I, like Joe, I just want everybody to be treated equally. I want everybody to be treated fair. That's what I was taught when I was a child. That's what I still believe. And, I think that I'm with Joe. We all have the same Bible. We all live off the same Bible. So that's the way I'm going to treat everyone. Like I've always been taught to treat. I treat Dr. Johnson just like I do all the other superintendents. That makes you feel good, don't it? No difference. Do what? That's right. That's absolutely true. I'm actually nicer to you than I am a lot. Yeah. So, but there's, I just try not to see people's color. And I don't have a fault. I don't think that's a fault. I just assume treat everybody the same, and that's the way I teach my grandchildren. It's the way I taught my daughter. Matter of fact, I've always told my daughter, you seek out the person who you feel like is probably feels like they're left out. That's the person you need to go sit next to. That's the person you need to talk to. That's the person you need to pick to be on your team. This is something that we grew up with. So, maybe I don't struggle with some of this like others, because it's been the way I was raised, to just treat everybody equally and treat everybody fairly. But I do appreciate your thoughts about your feelings, Jenny.
Thank you, Jenny. I really appreciate your courage to bring this up and to share how you feel about it. And I think it's very important discussion for our board and for us to be models for our community as elected officials. I agree 100% with you and stand with you. And I think there's so much for us to learn. And I've had the conversation so many times in my family about, I feel like I've lived in a bubble because I really don't know. And there's so much I have to learn. And I have said, and I've been promising my friends that are Black and brown that I have to educate myself, and I am vowing more how to know, so that I know, yeah, and I can say I'm accepting and I'm not, and I'm this and I'm that, but no, I'm not educated. I don't know what to say. I don't know how people feel, but I think it is my responsibility as an elected official to educate myself more so that I can speak out and that I can stand beside people. And I think it is our responsibility to help our 44,000 children in Hamilton County schools to be more, to feel better about who they are and be more accepting in all of our schools in Hamilton County. So I agree with 100% with you. Thank you so much.
I will say, Mrs. Hill did reach out to me a couple days ago and just not necessarily bare her soul as she did tonight, but and Jenny, I do appreciate that being vulnerable, and I'll be completely honest with you guys. She asked me to consider some training, and I'm going to look into that. One of the things, and I'm going to bare my soul to you all, that I struggle with many times, and I've struggled with it at my job, whether it be any number of trainings that I'm asked to take part in. I struggle a lot with the assumption that I'm not able to interact appropriately with other folks unless I'm exposed to some sort of training. And I struggle with many times feeling like training is trying to tell me how I should be thinking. And the reason I struggle with that is because most of the time that training is a training that allows people to stay in a safe place and not get their hands dirty. It's training that might give them a broad perspective of someone else's experience, but in reality it doesn't provide experience. And I'm thankful to have board members, Jenny, I'm thankful to have board members who are individuals of faith and who are followers of Jesus Christ, and I'm not ashamed of that. But as a follower of Jesus Christ, I'm instructed to align my thinking with Scripture. In Romans 12:2 says, don't be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And when you look at the Greek in Romans, when it talks about being conformed to the pattern of the world, it talks about the belief and the value system of the current age. And I really believe that if we all will take and consider others before ourselves, we won't be dealing with a lot of this stuff. We can't fix the spiritual with the physical. And I'm thankful that folks have a desire to do something. And again, this is just, and I'm bearing my soul. My struggle is that doing something to better understand another's culture doesn't always involve having someone tell me about that other culture. It involves me being so other-centered that I find myself immersed in their culture because I care and I want to make a difference. And so again, there's no doubt. I came on this board to see this board pursue excellence, to see this school system add value to our community in a way that, in my opinion, it had not done in a long time. I am thankful for the effort, the time, the energy, the work that's been put in by all of us. Some of us for the last 2 years, some of us for 4, some of us for much longer than that. So I think where I am with it is I I'd really love for us as a board, and I agree with Tiffany, to be able to have some conversation, some real conversation. I'd love to have that, because I'm going to struggle as an individual is if we were to participate in some type of training, then we're done with that, and where does that leave me? I don't know where the folks to my right and to my left, how they really feel. I've got African American family members, and we have conversation. We have a real conversation about what creates and what drives the issues that need to be addressed. And so I would love for us, and my preference would be for us to have some conversation, some passionate conversation, some straightforward conversation amongst ourselves, as we begin to look at the school system and where there are gaps in equity. I'll just end with this. Preference for one race or one people group or one ethnicity, it's a sin. And it's a condition of the heart. And training doesn't change people's hearts. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't some folks that don't need to be more aware. But it's a condition of the heart. And so what I'd like to do is I want to be able to bear my heart and my soul to the people who I am leading with on this board. And I have been convicted to lead and to work with. Again, so that this school system adds value to our community, period. And Jenny, I will commit to you that I will look at what you've asked me to look at, and I will commit to you that I will do my due diligence, and I will do my best to set my flesh aside as I look at that. But I would request also that we think about having some conversation. We're quick, and we're quick to have conversation about all the other business of the school system, and this is something that we walk around in this community, and again we are seen as leaders, and we are leaders, and I'd love to be able to sit with my colleagues and discuss from every corner of this county where there's equity, where there are equity issues in our system. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that commitment. And I thank you for your leadership.
All right, anyone else? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Johnson.
Well, just a reminder, we have asked for a special call on July 2nd, specifically for the reopening. Just emailed this earlier this afternoon, so you may not have it. We've had a chance to look at it. We're looking at trying to get the reopening plan before you, and obviously we've been having a conversation all along. We'll schedule some more time for conversation this upcoming week, but trying to get that framework kind of finalized, and then consideration of whatever adjustments to the LOIs. Justin and Brent work with Scott and Mary, as well as the developers around the Sears and JCPenney consideration. So those are the two items: the reopening plan, so to speak, and the letter of intent.
All right. I mean, that'd be up to the pleasure of the board. So you all, if regular meeting time is sufficient for you, if you need it to be a little later, that what day is that?
Is that a Tuesday? That's correct. No, it's a Thursday.
It's a Thursday. I mean, I'm good with 5:30, but I'm also open to make any adjustments.
It's Thursday, July 2nd. Before Friday's the holiday.
And if the board wanted to move it to earlier in the week, I mean, you know, whatever's the board pleasure, we want to try to nail down that week. And Keith and Colonel and Jen have been pushing. I think that's the day they'll have it really finalized and ready to roll.
I'm okay with Tuesday, but
30 works for me.
I want them to be prepared, so.
Can I make a point here? We've got some of our folks are a little cautious about, we're allowed by the state to have Zoom meetings through the end of June. If we had it prior to the July, if we had it in the say earlier in the week, those of our board members who preferred to do Zoom could legally do that and still. That's just a thought. I'm throwing that out. And those of you that have chosen not to come in might want to consider that. I'm just trying to speak to them. I plan to come if we have it either day, but I'm thinking about.
Mr. McClendon. Hey, you're muted still.
There we go. I know this is, are y'all done with that conversation? I can barely hear
We're trying to determine if we want to do it on the 2nd, or for those who have preferred the Zoom option, would, Dr. Highlander, are you assuming Tuesday the 29th?
I would say, yes, sir.
30th, sorry. I'm looking at the wrong months too.
I'm sorry, can I interject?
All right.
Yes.
Are we supposed to review?
I was going to bring something else up, so y'all can, you're one of those.
All right, hang on one second. I think we got a couple more on this.
Are we supposed to review the reopening plan on the 2nd as a board?
We'll
just do it together.
Yeah, you'll have it before the meeting. Our goal is to have it by Friday the 26th.
So you would feel comfortable with us moving the date of the meeting up to have the discussion about both items on the same day?
I'm getting ready to ask permission right now. Is Keith Fogelman on the phone? Keith on the line?
Yes.
Can we do June 30th?
Just to be perfectly frank, that really
Okay.
presses us. But if that's the date we need to be prepared, we'll have it ready for you all. Now, what our plan was initially was to have the plan to review on June 30th for the June 2nd meeting. So we'll be pressed to get it to you in several days in advance, like we had originally planned. But we'll target for June 30th.
We can go with the 2nd unless someone has a preference. Yeah.
I would
Okay.
prefer the 2nd. I'll be traveling on the
Okay.
30th.
Yeah, I think we need to make sure that task force has the time to do the work. It's really complicated and they're being very thoughtful with it.
I agree. I think they need to have the full time that they planned for.
We talked about doing some policies. Is that involved in the reopening?
Yeah, so
Okay.
we'll do a review over the next week. I don't think there'll be a ton of policy change. What'll actually happen that'll cover us will be the state board is going to have some rules and some policy. And so I know a little bit about it. I don't think off the top of my mind there's anything in there that's going to require us to create a policy. Their policy will give us cover.
I've got, my only reason for saying that was in deference to those. I certainly want to give the committee sufficient time to prepare. I certainly do. I was trying, those that were choosing to Zoom rather than I was trying to be differential toward them. Several teachers have mentioned something. I think several years ago we voted to extend the day 30 minutes to give built-in snow days. Since we are working toward virtual, right now, if we're out of school, if we're out for the pandemic, if we're out for the snow, we could do virtual. Our teachers have gone an extra 30 minutes to build in those extra days. I would suggest we consider knocking that 30 minutes off, making the day shorter and going virtual. If we're out for pandemic, if we're out for epidemics, or if we're out for snow, we could have virtual teaching going on and continue, and we don't need that extended 30 minutes that we voted in several years ago. That's something to consider at any rate, and I think our people are working extra for something that's needless if we're going to be doing it virtually. Something to consider anyway. Thank you.
Absolutely. My only comment would be, I'm fairly certain that the state board is going to give guidance that, that there will be continuous learning plans that each district will have to submit that's going to allow you to pivot to that would keep you from having to do that 30 minutes. So I think that we've been close on that feedback.
All right, Mr. McClendon.
Yeah, Joe, I wanted to just come back to a conversation y'all had on Monday about facilities and going forward and starting the process and getting dates and times that work for people to have our, kind of a longer facilities meeting. I know he asked y'all to think about it. Does anyone have thoughts on it as I kind of start thinking about it over the next day or two and send out an email, what dates work for us, or, does a Friday or does a Saturday morning or something along those lines?
If I could, that's basically, Tucker, what I was trying to refer to about we need to talk to the commission, which is our funding agent. And, that's what I was talking about, referring to a little bit earlier, that we work it through them, since we have to deal with them on funding. And the group suggested that we wait until after the budget to go into that. So that I was basically trying to line with what you were saying before.
Well, I think going back, I think we need to, before we kind of go to the commission, or I think our first thing needs to be as a board, get together and, get out some details that we need to work through on the plan. And then, wherever we get, and then go to the commission. I think, that might be step 2 or step 3, but I think the board needs to get together. We were planning to, and then, everything happened in the world. And we're just getting to where we can get back together and really hash out some of the stuff going along those lines.
Yeah, I agree that sooner is better, and starting with some of the ideas that we've talked about already about figuring out what are our key values with regard to how we're going to approach our facilities, making sure we're all using the same kind of language to discuss things like what a mega school is, what a community school is, what we're going to use to guide our final decision-making process as we look at the data from MGT and other things. Tucker, I think it would be really helpful whenever we do have it for the agenda to go out in advance so that we could, prepare. And I think possibly, with COVID, Zoom meetings have been accomplishing a whole lot. If we had some shared screens and able to interact that way, that I think we could probably get a lot done without having to think through the social distancing elements of it. So I guess to add to that, I do feel like it deserves a significant commitment of time, and I guess a board member could decide if they want to participate in it or not. But I think some good, if we were going to do Zooms, like a few 2-hour chunks or something could be useful, so that nobody's bottom gets too tired, because you can only absorb so much and think so much when you're sitting. But maybe that in lieu of a longer retreat, especially since we want to really watch our pennies with our budget.
Yeah, and I mean, I was just planning to have the meeting, at the boardroom or, in a larger conference room or something along those lines.
Okay, yeah. Well, but food or whatever,
Yeah. I mean, but I think we'll have the option probably to Zoom in no matter what, and, share some screens or whatever else. I know we're coming up on the holiday, July 4th. I was kind of looking at either the week of the 6th or 13th. The week of the 13th would be our next board meeting, the 16th, I believe. Does anyone, any objection to one of those 2 weeks?
Tucker, I tell you, this is what my suggestion would be. Why don't you throw that out in an email, or let Ms. Ford do that, and let's see what kind of response we get back on that as far as possible days, and that'll give us a better idea, and we can kind of go from there, and that'll get us past the 4th of July holiday. We won't have anything staring at us other than our monthly meeting.
Yep.
A
Sounds good.
doodle poll would be terrific.
Yeah, that will work.
Thank you, Tucker.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, we have anything else? All right, meeting adjourned.
Thank you, guys.